Tom, thank you so much for taking all the time to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tom, thank you so much for always being a friend to the community. We are lucky to have you represent us. You are approachable. You always look into our issues and find solutions. I would ask you, what do you think are the main issues confronting the district this term?
Well, the main issues that the people are concerned about are the border, the southern border. People are very concerned when they see those images on television of people streaming over the border. That's probably the number one issue people are concerned about. And that fits in with public safety as well. That's why I'm so happy I've been endorsed by the police union. The police unions don't always endorse Democrats, but the police unions endorsed me this year. That's a big deal. Second issue is affordability. People are concerned about inflation, they're concerned about the taxes, and the state and local tax deduction is a major issue for the people that live in my district on Long Island and in Queens. And we need to get the state and local tax deduction so you can deduct your property taxes, your sales, your school taxes, and your state income taxes from your income so you don't pay taxes at the federal level on the taxes you've already paid.
Yeah. Tom, we know you have shown some leadership on that issue for the past few years. A lot of our community, a lot of our kids can't afford buying a house here anymore. They're moving to North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida. So do you have any specific plans? We know this, those deductions, the cap is ending in 2025. I don't know which way the presidential election is going to go, but do we have an advocate for us who's going to fight to remove those caps that we have?
Well, I'm your advocate. I mean,
yes.
When I was in Congress earlier, I passed it 3 times in the House of Representatives, but they couldn't pass it in the Senate. So to pass a bill, you have to get it in the House, the Senate, and the president has to sign it. So I passed it 3 times in the House, despite tremendous opposition from the Republicans and opposition from the far left members of my party. I built a coalition of most of the Democrats and some Republicans to get it through the House 3 times. Chuck Schumer has said publicly, if you get this done again in the House, I will get it done in the Senate. So I believe we're going to be in a good position in 2025 to get the restoration of the state and local tax deduction.
Tom, we are so happy that you are a candidate and a congressman who does not adhere to that hyper partisanship, and you look for common sense solutions to problems. Would you tell our viewers, give them a message, why is it so important to look for compromise to run the government?
Well, every problem we face in the country is complicated. Nothing is simple. If somebody says, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do, they don't know what they're talking about. Everything is complicated. Every issue we face, both domestically and internationally. And anybody who's in business or even in a family, you realize you can't solve a complicated problem if everybody's yelling and screaming at each other. You'll never get to what the actual issue is. You need people of goodwill to sit down at the table and say, well, I think this. And the other guy says, well, I think that. Well, how about this? Well, how about that? And you work your way to try and find common ground to move forward. If everybody's yelling and screaming, you never, ever can solve a problem. It's only my way or the highway. Now, you could try and bully your way in, and you could sometimes pass things with just one party, sometimes, much harder to do in today's world. But when that happens, that will usually get undone later on. So it's better to find compromise. So, for example, we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. Trillions of dollars for roads and bridges and sewers and water and mass transit, and to build the infrastructure in our country that will put millions of people to work in good paying jobs and will actually make the quality of life for people better, fixing our airports and our ports and making our country more productive. The Bipartisan CHIPS Act. Right now, most of the chips, 95% of the computer chips in the world are made in Taiwan. Everybody's very worried that Taiwan is going to get taken over by China. If that happens and China decides they want to cut off the chip manufacturing to the U.S. because they're our adversary, we'll be at a tremendous disadvantage. So we got a bipartisan compromise to invest in chip manufacturing here in the United States of America. Well, it's cheaper probably to make them in Taiwan. It's cheaper to make them in other places. But we have, as a national security matter and as an economic matter, have to figure out how to do it here in the United States of America. We work together, Democrats and Republicans, to come up with a compromise to do that. Now, that was under the prior Congress. when Biden was the president and the Democrats had the House and the Senate. But we got bipartisan compromise. This Congress, we've seen very little get done. Why? This past 2 years. Why? Because everything has been my way or the highway. Everybody's just trying to ram through just what they want, no compromise. The one thing we did compromise on was when Democrats and Republicans worked together to address the problem of Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. So that was one example where I said, Speaker Johnson, who's a Republican, Marjorie Taylor Greene, do you know the name Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yep.
Very extreme, right-wing, crazy person. Said, if you put the bill on the floor to fund Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, I will kick you out as Speaker the way we kicked Kevin McCarthy out. Now, he's a Republican, the Speaker. I was the first Democrat to say, if you put that bill on the floor, number one, I guarantee you it will pass overwhelmingly bipartisan. But number two, if they try to kick you out, if Marjorie Taylor Greene and the other members of the Freedom Caucus try to kick you out, Mike Johnson, even though I'm a Democrat and you're a Republican, I'll vote to keep you as the Speaker. So he put it on the floor. It passed overwhelmingly bipartisan. She moved to take him out as Speaker. And I and most other Democrats voted to keep him as the Speaker. Now, we don't agree with him, but I thought we have to figure out how can we stop having the crazy extremists on the far right and the far left from having power. And this was a way to do that.
That's why we are so thankful for your leadership. Tom, you talked of safety. Climate change, that's become a safety issue now. Lots of constituents of District 3 have families, friends, properties in Florida. How do you plan to address that?
Well, this is a major problem. We've had a big problem because we've been talking about this since the end of the 1980s. Climate change is being a problem. And for decades, the oil industry, with the help of the Republicans, have said, this is not true. It's a hoax. It's not true. Now, is it true that we need to figure out how to transition in a way that doesn't make our fuel prices or our utility costs go through the roof? Yes. But we have to move towards green energy, solar, wind, nuclear even, hydro, other types of renewable energy, because we're destroying the planet. The number of storms that we've had, so there's different things that happen. There are droughts, there are forest fires, there are floods, and there are severe storms. Here where we live, severe storms is the big concern. As a matter of fact, if you look at the statistics, there were about 20 big storms in the Northeast this year, whereas usually it would be 3 or 4 a year. Now it's 20. This is affecting us. This is causing tremendous damage to people's property. And you just mentioned Florida, for example, the hurricanes that just happened in Florida. So we have to do things in the short term and the long term. In the short term, we have to respond to the emergencies, and we have to start building infrastructure that can withstand the storms and the flooding. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to start investing in things like stormwater and doing wetland restoration and bulkheading and doing things to address flooding. In the long term, we need to address climate change. Now, the bipartisan infrastructure law is a lot of infrastructure money to address resiliency, but then it was mainly Democrats, no Republicans. There was another thing called the IRA Act that was the largest investment to move to green economy in the history of not just the United States, in the history of the world. That money is to encourage investment in solar, wind, hydro, hydrogen, and nuclear energy, renewable energy. The problem is that President Trump has said, he went to the oil industry, he says, make me the president, I will undo all of that work on climate change, just give me $1 billion for my campaign. So that's really a problem. The problem is that President Trump has done a very effective job of distracting people from talking about the issues. There's a lot of things that he wants to do that are very extreme that we never hear about, but it's in a book called Project 2025.
Yes.
But when they asked him, why, Mr. President, did you kill the bipartisan deal to secure the border? Because in February, the Democrats and Republicans worked together to say, we're going to build more wall, we're going to hire more judges, we're going to hire more border police, We're going to give money to New York and California and other states that have been affected by all these immigrants coming here, Florida, Texas. We're going to do all these things, technology to go after fentanyl. There was a bipartisan deal. Biden said he would sign it. Harris said she would support it. Mitch McConnell said he would support it. Mm-hmm. The Wall Street Journal said it was great, conservative paper. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce said it was great. The president of the Border Patrol Union, who's a big Trump supporter, said this is the right way to go. Mm-hmm. Why didn't it happen? Because President Trump called everybody up and his friends in the Senate and the House and said, don't support that deal. I don't want to give a win to Biden, and I want to run on the chaos. Mm-hmm. But how come we're not talking about that? Because when they asked President Trump in the debate, why did you kill the bipartisan Senate deal to secure the border? You know what he said? Mm-hmm. They're eating the cats. Yes. They're eating the dogs. Yeah. They're eating the pets. Mm-hmm. So for 45 days, all we did is talk about that. Mm-hmm. We saw the cartoons, people on their phones of the dogs looking scared or the cats looking scared or people eating out. But nobody talked about the fact that he killed the bipartisan deal. He's a master of diverting your attention from the issues. There are a lot of things that he wants to do, say, for example, in the Indian American community. Mm-hmm. He wants to deport millions of people. Mm-hmm. Now, how are they going to pick all the people that they're going to deport? Mm. Are they going to look at them based upon their accent, mm-hmm. or by the way they dress, mm-hmm. or their skin color? Mm-hmm. Or how are they going to pick all the people? You think that all the paperwork is perfect? Mm-hmm. I know for a fact it's not. Mm-hmm. So the way to go is something I'm working on, which is I'm building a Republican and Democratic coalition mm-hmm. to bring in from the outside business, badges, and the Bible. To bring religious people who care about people, law enforcement who cares about safety, and business people who care about business to say, we need your support for a bipartisan compromise to, one, secure the border, mm-hmm. two, fix the broken asylum system, because all these people coming over the border are seeking asylum and they're not doing it for the right reasons. Mm. The problem is because there's so many people and the system is so outdated that it takes 6 or 7 years to adjudicate the case. Mm-hmm. In the meanwhile, the people are here. 85% of the cases get denied. 85% get denied. Mm-hmm. But it takes 6, 7, 8 years to adjudicate the cases. So we need to secure the border, fix the asylum system, and we need to fix the legal immigration system that hasn't been updated for 30 years so that we can address the dreamers, so we can address the TPS recipients, so we can bring more people to reunify with their families, so we can bring more skilled workers in mm-hmm. for work visas. Mm-hmm. So, but again, it's complicated. And you can't solve a complicated problem when everybody's yelling and screaming at each other.
So are you proposing we do all these three things together?
Yes. And I have a Republican mm-hmm. from Texas, from a border state, mm-hmm. who's a conservative guy, mm-hmm. who's a former Navy SEAL, mm-hmm. who's working together with me to build this national coalition of Democrats and Republicans. Mm-hmm. In addition, previously I worked with another Republican who's a Republican from Pennsylvania. He's more moderate. He's a lawyer and CPA like I am. Mm-hmm. He's a former FBI agent mm-hmm. Who used to prosecute public corruption. Mm-hmm. He and I wrote a letter together to President Biden mm-hmm. and said, Mr. President, use your executive authority to secure the border so people cannot apply for asylum in between the ports of entry. Mm. Because those people streaming over the border now are applying for asylum, which they're legally allowed to do under the current system, mm-hmm. in between the ports of entry. Mm. We're saying, you can't apply in between the ports of entry. You have to go through a port of entry. Mm-hmm. The president actually put in place an executive order. The numbers are half what they were back in the spring. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to last because executive orders don't last. You have to pass legislation by the Congress. So I don't know if I'm being too...
There's only one more issue I would like to hear from you. You know, people are in the constituency are concerned. You mentioned Project 25 with the recent judgments that we have had out of Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade and attacking, you know, individual rights, the rights to privacy. Is there something you plan to do in case we have an administration which wants to nationalize, let's say, laws against abortion?
Well, we'll have to see what happens with the election. I mean, right now, mm-hmm. the focus has got to be on securing the border, fixing SALT, bringing money back to the district, and healing the bipartisan divide. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm endorsed by Newsday. I'm endorsed by the police unions. And as far as all the really extreme things that President Trump is proposing in Project 2025, mm-hmm. or undoing the laws related to climate, or prosecuting people that he disagrees with, or using the military to try and enforce some laws, or taking away women's reproductive rights, or giving people more guns, or all of the really absurd things that are being proposed. The only way we're going to stop that is by winning. So it's going to matter what happens at the presidential race, but it's also going to matter what happens in the House of Representatives, and it's also going to matter what happens in the Senate. So right now, I'm asking my friends in the Indian American community to please vote for Tom Souzzi. They know me. They know my record. They know that I'm a reasonable person. They know that I'll fight for them the way that they've always fought for me. And no matter what happens in the presidential race or in any other races, I will always be there to fight for my Indian American friends and to fight for reasonable solutions to problems to try and help the people.
The community knows that very well, and they are very thankful to have you in the Congress. I wish you all the very
you so
best
much.
for your campaign.
Thank you so much
for taking
Thank
all the time
you.
today.
Dhanyavad.